The Israeli military released video on Saturday said to show troops operating in Jabaliya, in the northern Gaza Strip. Israeli forces have repeatedly returned to Jabaliya, a town and densely populated urban refugee camp dating back to the 1948 war surrounding Israel's creation. The north has already suffered the heaviest destruction of the conflict and has been encircled by Israeli forces since the beginning of the war. Gaza's health ministry said Thursday that 46,006 Palestinians have been killed and 109,378 wounded in the Israel-Hamas war, with no end in sight. The ministry says women and children were more than half the fatalities but does not say how many of the dead were fighters or civilians. The Israeli military says it has killed over 17,000 militants, without providing evidence. It blames Hamas for civilian deaths because it says militants operate in residential areas. Israel's military released on Friday footage of fighter jets taking off for airstrikes on Yemen against what it said were Houthi rebel targets. Its statement Friday said fighter jets struck on the western coast and inland Yemen, a day after the Houthis launched 3 drones at Israel. The U.S. military bombed Yemen earlier this week. The Houthis confirmed the strikes and said they occurred while people were rallying in Sana'a in support of Palestinians in Gaza. In recent weeks, Israel and Hamas have appeared to inch closer to an agreement for a ceasefire in Gaza and the release of Israeli hostages.
Valery Ryabik, a military expert and development director of the Defense Express Company of Ukraine, noted that the destruction of the Engels oil depot, which supplied vital fuel for Russian strategic aviation aircraft, is a serious blow to Russia. He said this on the Espresso TV channel. The Engels oil depot and the Engels 2 airbase are interconnected. The oil depot is a subdivision of the so-called Rosreserve and is called Krystal. It provides fuel to Russian strategic aviation aircraft, noted Ryabik. According to the development director of Defense Express, the damage to the Engels oil depot is an extremely important event as the strategic reserves of special fuel used by Tu-95 and other Russian strategic aviation aircraft are the so-called T1 fuel, which can be destroyed. It is worth noting that Russia's production capacity for this fuel is not that large. The Engels airfield is also used for technical work and aircraft maintenance. Despite the fact that most of the aircraft have been transferred to other airfields, they still have to periodically arrive for refueling and maintenance, explained Ryabik. The military expert also added that Russia's strategic component is currently being partially immobilized due to the destruction of critical fuel stocks for Russian aviation. Military expert Alexander Kovalenko expressed that the strike on Engels, home to Russia's largest strategic aviation base, highlights the country's severe shortage of air defense systems. According to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Russia has lost 1,038 air defense systems since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. While Russian forces lose around 30 air defense systems per month, they can only produce and repair a few, putting Russia in a critical shortage phase. Neither the USSR nor Russia has ever fully secured its airspace, with some areas having complete air defense, others partial coverage, and some with gaps. From 2022 to 2023, the Moscow region and Crimea were the most protected, while regions like Saratov had strong but not top-tier defense. Recently, there have been reports of exported air defense systems being deployed in Russian regions, suggesting that these contracted systems were seized or purchased to address the shortage of surface-to-air missiles. Kovalenko highlighted that the focus is on Saratov, not Moscow, and the latest strike's success is undeniable as Ukraine steadily depletes Russia's air defenses and critical infrastructure. Meanwhile, the Kremlin, standing at the Rubicon ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration, failed to demonstrate anything that would convince the 47th president of the US that negotiations, not pressure, were the way to go, the expert noted. Despite planning ultimatums and demands, Russia enters 2025 with uncertainty. However, considering President Zelensky's statements about strike drone and missile production, Ukraine hasn't even begun its strike on Russia yet. This has merely been preparation.